exploring hope in special needs grief, resilience beyond life's challenges. Today on Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them.
One, two, three, four.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. Your host is Steve Dover, a special needs advocate and father of two special needs sons. This is a faith-based, in-depth conversation-styled podcast with and for parents of special needs children. This podcast will let you have a front row seat to hear how they do it, why they do it, and what you can learn from their experiences as they share their exceptional stories. Let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. I'm your host, Steve Dover, and today we'll embark on an emotional journey as we delve into the profound topic of navigating grief in the realm of special needs parenting. In this episode, I've entitled Beyond the Challenges, Finding Hope Amid Special Needs Grief. We aim to illuminate the path toward resilience and hope, acknowledging that the journey is often marked by profound challenges and unexpected turns. Our guest today is a friend and confidant to my family. Today, you will hear how he helped our family during our time of grief in May of 2015, as I share things I've never publicly shared about our journey. He is a seasoned counselor and pastor and brings insights that go beyond conventional narratives. He offers solace and inspiration to parents and caregivers navigating the intricate terrain of grief. Let's get to our interview. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so glad you were able to join us. I've got a very good friend with me today, and we're going to deal with a subject that we both have experience in from different viewpoints. If you have listened to this podcast, episode 1, my wife and I shared our story of our son Noah that passed away in 2015 from a genetic disorder, and we were in with the hospice company, and right after all that happened, the hospice chaplain paid a visit to our house and called on us. And little did I know that the man that was going to walk into my house was somebody I had known just about all my life and known his family for a big portion of my life, and the family that he married into. I've known them for all of my life. But my guest today is Rodney Gilmore, and he is a pastor of Covenant Christian Church in Oaks Bluff, Alabama, also a retired hospice chaplain, and like I said, that's where we met. But today we're going to talk about grief and how to handle that as a special needs family or just as a parent in general. But Rodney, I'm so glad you were able to join me today. Good to see you again. I hope everything's well your way.
Oh, it's good to see you too, and I appreciate you inviting me to take part in this. I've been looking forward to it. Sure have.
As have I. Well, let's just get right into it. And I understand that some of your answers will, because of your vocations, will kind of cross between maybe hospice and pastor, or chaplain and pastor. So that's fine. But as a hospice chaplain and a pastor, you have a unique perspective on grief. Can you share how your experiences have shaped your understanding of grief, particularly in the context of special needs families?
Well, it's a heavy thing, no matter what you do.
Right.
Grief and in any situation is one of the most difficult thing in the world to deal with, especially when you have sickness and death that touches your family. It's very, very difficult. And I was listening to your introduction with me, saying that we went into this in two different ways. Kim and I have lost a child as well, and it's very, very hard. And one thing that we learned, and if I could say anything, and that is that you can't fix grief. You
No,
can't.
sir, you can't.
You can't come into a situation, no matter what it is, no matter what the situation is. You can't go into a situation and have the magic words that fix grief. Nothing does. Grief can be, you can accompany people through their grief, and you can walk with people through their grief and be there, but you can't do anything to fix it. All of us would love to have the magic words,
Yes.
just to be able to go into a situation where a family is grieving and just make them feel better. But truly, there is no such thing. There's no such words like that. And if I had that, if I had the ability to do that, I'd assure you, nobody does, brother.
No,
Nobody does.
No. And one thing we have learned now, 8, almost 9 years removed from that day, is that grief really never leaves. It comes in waves. You may be doing fine for a long, long stretch of time, and you think you're on top of it. And then a memory or a sound, a smell, something will trigger all those feelings back again. So it's kind of like a wave. It just comes and goes. It comes and goes. You never actually get over it.
That's right. That's right. And it becomes kind of part of your DNA, you know, and it becomes part of your story. It becomes part of your life. And I wish, whenever I do a funeral of someone who has passed, I always encourage the family, don't be afraid to talk about the person who's going on into heaven.
Right.
Because we're afraid if we say anything to anybody about something, then they're going to get grief. They're going to feel grief. Well, they've already got that in them. It's going to be in them forever. And I always try to encourage families, especially at the holidays, don't be afraid to talk about those people that have passed into heaven. They are a part of our lives, and their living and dying is part of our story. And I have never felt, since working with people who have passed away in hospice for so long, I've never felt like that I should not say anything. People need to talk about their loved ones. They're in heaven, but they're still their loved ones.
Right. And there's different stages of grief too, I believe. It's not all one big bundle. It's kind of a process that you go through, experiencing different things.
There are stages of grief, and a lot of that has to do with, like, before the person passes away, you start making deals with the Lord, and then you go through the time where you blame yourself. If I had done something different, then maybe and even I've had many people feel like God was punishing them, because something bad happened. And none of that is so. It's part of, living and dying is part of living in this fallen world. And grief is the most troubling and heartbreaking thing that we go through in it. But it's still it's something that we have to deal with. We have to deal with it. And if I could give any experience advice from working with families for so many years, and that is that if you're just available, be available to people. If you're a friend with someone who has a loved one that's passing away, or a family member, don't try to go in and fix the situation, but just be there. Be available to people. And you were talking earlier about how that your family went through that. God will. You can't tell somebody this while they're going through grief. They got to get away from it and look back on it before they'll understand it. But God gives you the strength, and I can't tell you that while you're going through grief. I can only tell you that, down the road from grief a little bit. Looking back, you can see how God gave us everything that we had to have to get through those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah, 8 years ago, this would have been a much more difficult conversation to have.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely would have. You touched on something that I wanted to ask you just a quick question about, and that's something called survivor guilt. Is that real?
It is absolutely real. Yes, sir. And it's real. It's real in almost every death in a family. Everybody that's left behind will ask, why wasn't it me?
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't it me? And even then, when they say, why wasn't it me? They will, they'll still feel guilty. They'll still feel like that they did something to cause the death of a loved one.
Right.
And if I could just urge people to know that that's not what it's about.
Right.
God doesn't kill our children to punish us. And if I can preach just a minute, it's because all the punishment that was required for our sins was given to Christ on the cross.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
forgive me for preaching a little bit there, but you did get a preacher on here.
We'll pass the plate here at intermission. We'll be fine.
Yeah, but guilt is a very real thing for all survivors, and whether they'll come out and tell you that or not. And I think also PTSD. You go through. You'll go through those same exact feelings that you had the day after you lost a loved one. Throughout your life from time to time.
Right. Absolutely. And we went through that. We went through a time of that too, asking, is there something else we could have done? Is there a procedure we could have tried? Is there a medicine we could have tried? Is there all kind of questions run through your head during that time? And we just had to. I don't remember if it was you that told us this or someone else that we were talking with, but we just had to come to the realization that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's not okay to stay that way, but for a while you're not going to be okay, and that's all right.
Yeah, my pastor back when my wife and we had a baby girl that passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And when she passed away, my pastor told me, he said that, well, I lost my thought. Forgive me, brother. But he told me that we should not, I don't know how to say this. We should not be afraid to try to have another baby.
Mm-hmm.
We should not sit around and, this is what I was going to say. We don't need to pitch a tent in grief. We walk through the valley. We walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But if you're not real careful, grief will become your friend. And when I don't mean that in a good way, you'll get comfortable in grief, and you'll just stay there throughout your life. And people that do that live you never get rid of grief completely, but when you just make it your life, then you're just, you're asking for severe mental incapacity if you do that.
And it puts strain on relationships, and just like you said, your overall life in general takes a drastic turn if you pitch that tent, like he said.
Yeah, that's right.
You're just passing through. There's no place to pull over. You just keep going.
That's right. And if you don't mind, I would tell you this, that my mom, my dad passed away when he was 49 years old. Mm-hmm. And my mom went through a year of terrible, terrible grief. Mm-hmm. And a year is about right, Steve. Yeah. I mean, the Jewish culture gives, if a person dies in a Jewish family, they don't let that person do anything for about 6 or 8 weeks. And then they have a whole year of grief care that they give to the family. Yeah. And then after that year, they expect the family to move on. Mm. My mom lived in that about a year until me and my brother had to tell her, you can't live like this forever. And she finally stepped through the valley, but she got in that valley, and it took her a year and a half to walk through it.
Yeah. And we had good days and bad days. It was I'll say it was tougher on my wife because it was her biological child. He was my son by marriage, but we were a blended family, but we didn't use the word step. I mean, my kids were hers and her kids were mine. And we did our best to raise them that way. But, you've got, well, I kind of lost my train of thought too. I don't know if there's something going around or what, but, talking about, taking the time to get over it. I think it took her longer to get to a manageable state of it, than it did me, just simply because that was her biological child.
Right.
And mother's love. I mean, mothers, it's in their DNA to love. And when the one they love is taken away, then I think mothers grieve different than dads do. Have you found that?
Yes, sir, I do. And they're also more, they present it more freely than we will. We'll hold on to it and hide it, and they'll make it known a lot of times.
Yeah.
But see, and Steve, your wife had a good husband and family around her, and that's the big thing. That's a big, big deal. And a lot of people that have people that pass on don't have that. And if I could just put people around the grieving for a little while, I'd do that. Not that they can be with them 24/7, not because you have to have some time to be away and be alone, but having family and loved ones around you, giving you the, people say, well, I don't need your sympathy, but we do. We need one another's sympathy during times like that. Well, and people in the Holy Spirit's what gets you through it,
One of the scriptures that got my wife through the toughest times was the story in the Old Testament of when there was a battle going on and Moses was standing there, and when his arms got tired, as long as he had his arms held up, the Israelites were winning. They were victorious. But when he got tired and his arms came down, they started losing. So two others came up and held his arms up during that time so that they could win the battle. And my wife has often said that I was on one arm and her best friend was on the other arm, and that's the only way she got through it.
Yeah. And that's how we get through it, is leaning and depending on one another. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And I don't know how people get through it that don't have others to strengthen them.
If it had not been for our faith and for our family, I doubt very seriously we would be in the shape or the state of mind that we're in now.
Yeah. Well, when a person has a loved one that passes away and we go over to visit with them, we're helpless. We have no idea what to say or what to do. And if you can just stay for a little while, because we get uncomfortable when we get in that situation. We'll stay. We'll tell you, if you need anything, let me know. I love you. Goodbye. Because it's hard, because you don't feel like you're making a difference. And I'll be honest with you, the person you're talking to, the grieving person, they don't feel like you're making a difference in that moment either. Right. But a year from now, they will absolutely look back and say, I wouldn't have made it without Steve, or I wouldn't have made it without you being here. Yeah. That takes a while to come about, but it is true. Yeah. It is true.
Well, in those days, we were blessed that Noah came home on hospice, and he came home on a Wednesday and he passed away the following Wednesday. But we had that whole week to try to get started on the closure aspect of it. We were there with him. Family came in, church members came in, ministers came in. So all of that was going on. And then when he passed, we had some folks that stayed with us until after the service. And then everybody went back to their life. And we were left in that house, and the silence in that house was deafening. Noah, in his last several years, was hooked up to several machines, oxygen concentrator that made all kind of monstrous noises, and we got used to hearing that during the night, while we were sleeping. And then after he passed and after everything was over with, they got the medical equipment, and we didn't have that noise anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how would you talk to that parent that after everything's over with and everybody's hugged them and told them, we're here for you, and the funeral home's giving them the packet and everything's over with, and they go back home to that quiet house? What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them first and foremost is not to cut themselves off. All right, not to cut themselves off. That's what you want to do when you're in grief. You don't want to be around people. You don't necessarily want people being sympathetic towards you. But I would beg anybody going through grief to find them, the people that love them, and put them and stay around them for a while. Let those people minister to you. Mm-hmm. And then I would also say, look for the intangibles. I don't know how to explain this except to say the things that the Lord's doing for you, the little things that happen that give you strength, the little moments that cause you to smile, and you'll have and you'll almost feel guilty, for smiling because they're gone. But those little moments, those things are God sent. I believe with all my heart they're God sent, because those little moments of thinking and they're painful now. I'm not saying they're not painful. Yeah. They're painful to even think of good moments during the grief. It's painful, but those are the things that strengthen you. Those are the things that keep His memory and the Holy Spirit near you, acknowledging what the Holy Spirit's doing for you. Can I tell you this, Steve? You talked about knowing my wife's family before you knew me.
I did.
So you knew Clayton.
I did.
Clayton McKenzie.
I knew all those McKenzies.
I was so worried because my wife loves real big. All right. And I had always worried that when something happened to her mom or dad, she wouldn't get over it.
Yeah.
Because she had always talked about, we all need to go in the rapture,
Yeah.
If something happens to my mom or dad, I don't know what I'll do. And I had prayed, because they both died within a year of each other. And I had prayed and said, God, you're going to have to do something here, because Kim will just lose it, And the day that I call him Mr. McKenzie. That was my name for him, Mr. McKenzie. But the day he died, he was in the playroom, the recreation room of their home. We had a hospital bed set up there. He was on hospice. And I don't know if you remember, Mr. McKenzie had one eye. He had a glass eye. And before he died, he became deaf. He could barely hear anything at all. No. And so we were keeping vigil. I don't know any other way to say it. We were waiting on him to pass. We knew it wouldn't be long, and the whole family was there. And his son, Doug, was sitting in the bed beside him. And Mr. McKenzie had been having a conversation with people all day long that we couldn't see. All right. That we couldn't talk to. He had been talking all day long. And right before he passed, he opened his eyes and started singing gospel music. Now, my daughter had put a little gospel album on the radio and turned it on real low so it wouldn't just be quiet in the room. Well, he's deaf, but he wakes up singing this song. Wow. And my brother-in-law, Doug, he said, Daddy, can you hear that music? He said, I can hear it fine. And he turned and looked at his son and he said, and son, I can see out of my glass eye now. You can. He said, I can see out of my glass eye. Wow. And we called all the family together, and they gathered around his bed. And our little girl who is in heaven, her name is Ashley Brooke. And he called Kim over to his bedside and took her by the hand. And he said, Kim, I've been talking to Ashley all day long. Wow. He said, she's not a baby anymore. She's a young girl, and she's got hair of gold. Wow. She's got hair of gold. Wow. And he said, I've been talking to her all day long. And I can't explain it other than to say that the grace of God moved into that house. And as hard as it was, and as difficult as the grief was, there was as much grace as there was grief.
Yes.
And it was like God just gave us what we had to have to get through that time. And I believe it. Now, it don't always happen like that.
No.
But God gives strength in different ways.
Absolutely.
He'll do that.
Well, our Sharon, our hospice nurse, I think she's passed away now, but
I remember Sharon. Yeah, I remember her.
She was with us right up to the end, and was there in the room when he passed. And when everything was over with, and we'd kind of got a grip on our emotions, and it took about an hour or so before we were ready to move to the next phase and do the next thing. But she told us later that of all the hospice cases she had worked, that our son's passing was one of the more spiritual ones that she had ever encountered. Because there was crying and emotional reactions immediately when it passed, when he passed, but and I can't explain this other than just use the words that are in my head. Within minutes after he passed, his whole countenance changed. And he didn't look sick anymore. He didn't look like he was hurting anymore. And a lot of people have different beliefs and different ideas on things like that, but I purposely took a picture of him in that condition. And we've got it tucked away. It's not something we look at. It's not something that we parade around in front of others or anything like that. But we've always got that picture. Just when I look at it, it doesn't make me sad. It makes me feel good. And it lets me know that he's okay now. There's no sickness in his body. There's no torment going on. Everything is perfect now. And you could see that on his face in that picture.
Oh, wow.
You could.
And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. It is. You kind of watch them go into eternity, and that's God getting them ready for. I can tell you stories like that over and over again about how God did that. God let you see that, Steve. Yeah. He let you see what was necessary for those moments. Yeah. I love it. Now when I remember Sharon telling me about that being a spiritual experience.
Do you?
I remember her.
Okay.
Sure did.
Yeah.
She did, and she has passed on, Steve. But she was an exceptional nurse.
I don't think we could have had a better one.
Yeah, she was a nurse with a big heart.
Yeah,
she was good at what she did. But
absolutely.
But when Ashley Brooke passed away, there's two things I want to say about this. When she passed away, I got mad. I'm not.
I understand.
I thought more highly of myself than I should have, but I got mad because I had been traveling on the road preaching in 2030 revival here, and it's that bargaining stage you go through of grief where I said to God, I'm yours. I've given you everything I have my whole life. I don't understand why my child had to die.
Yeah.
And when she died, when she died in the hospital, and when she died, I got mad. I had trusted the Lord to heal her. I wanted the Lord to heal her. And but in the intensive care nursery, the doctor took all the tubes off, handed that baby to to my wife. And when Kim just said, Rod, do you want to hold her? And I said, yeah, I'll hold her. And while I was holding her, she died. She died while I was holding her. And just anger came over me. I got so mad at the Lord.
Yeah.
And my wife, I guess, just sensed that I was getting tore up, you
Mm-hmm.
know. She was in a wheelchair because she'd had a cesarean surgery and that kind of thing. And she reached over and grabbed my britches leg and she just pulled on me. She said, "Let's pray." And I said, "Kim, I don't want to pray.
Yeah.
I don't have any desire to talk to God."
Yeah.
And she said, "Rodney, pray with me." You know, like that. Okay. And this is what she said, Steve. She said, "Dear Lord," I'll never forget her prayer. I know it by heart. She said, "Dear Lord, you have Ashley Brooke with you now. Would you tell her how much her mama and her daddy really do love her?"
Yeah.
And I can't explain it. I don't have any means to explain what I felt, but it's like somebody opened the door and the anger left. The grief didn't leave,
No.
but the anger left.
Yeah.
And Holy Spirit gave to me that day peace that passes understanding.
Yeah.
I had a peace that I had no reason to have. And it was because of the fervency and the sincerity of my wife's prayer. The Lord answered her prayer immediately. You know, He gave us the peace that we needed to have.
Well, my friends, we'll stop the interview there for this week. Next week, we will pick it up, and I want you to join Rodney and I as we discuss a form of grief that often goes overlooked in the lives of special needs parents. Before I let you go today, I wanted to read something to you. I wrote this not too many months after our son passed away in 2015 that we referenced in this week's episode. And I was going through a tough time. I've always been one to write my feelings, but never verbally express my feelings. So I took a pen and some paper, and I wrote these feelings down. And as real as they were to me that day, I hope they will be real to you today. Maybe you're going through what we were going through 8 years ago. Maybe you're about to go through that. Maybe that is the next thing on your calendar is the earthly death of someone you love. And this was written with a broken father's heart. But today I can say that all is well. Things are great. Things are better. But it didn't seem that way when I wrote this. But I want you to listen to this, and I'll let you go for the day. I entitled it, "But It Wasn't Today." One day, when asked how we're doing, we'll be able to respond without crying, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be able to pass his room and not instinctively want to look in on him, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be able to joke and have fun as a family, but it wasn't today. One day we'll get used to it being just the four of us in one vehicle, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be able to sleep without the aid of hearing his machines, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be able to go to church and not see his casket in the front of the stage, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be able to help others who have lost a child and are hurting, but it wasn't today. One day we'll be okay, but it wasn't today. Be well, my friends. I hope you'll join us next week. Before we go, I want to thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you are the parent of a special needs child and wish to share your story with us or know someone we should talk with on the show, send an email to exceptionalstoriespodcast@gmail.com. If you've been enjoying the show, we'd love to hear from you. If you can take a minute, just leave us a 5-star rating on your preferred podcast platform. It would mean the world to us. Your ratings help us reach more listeners and continue to bring the quality content that you've learned to enjoy. I also want to invite you to follow us on our social media pages. You can find us on both Facebook and Instagram at Exceptional Stories Podcast. Lastly, if you found this podcast informative and you would like to keep it going, go to our website at www.exceptionalstoriespodcast.com. Click on the support button on our homepage. For as little as $3 per month, you can play an active role in making sure these stories are heard. Thank you for choosing to spend your precious time with us. Remember, you're not alone. Together, we'll create a world that embraces and supports every exceptional story. Until next week, be blessed.